outside the council's control. However, people wishing to film or record the meeting should do so in a way that does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Also, so that the meeting is not disturbed, could I ask everyone present to please turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent and ensure that your environment is distraction-free. In addition, please turn off or move smart speakers, Alexa, Siri, Cortana, etc., as these record conversations, and this could be a breach of GDPR. As this is a virtual meeting, it will be run slightly differently. Members will need to introduce themselves and state their name and confirm that they can hear, see proceedings. This is important for the purpose of recording attendance and transparency of the meeting. I will do this by undertaking an alphabetical roll call. Members will use the raise hand feature in the participant section of Zoom software if they wish to speak, and will be allowed to do so in a queue system. So I'm just going to go through everybody alphabetically. Councillor Bolton, can you confirm you can see and hear?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Bolton, I confirm that I can see and hear the proceedings.
Cheers, thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm I can both see and hear proceedings.
Councillor Parsons.
Yes, I can confirm I can both see and hear.
Cheers. Councillor Parton.
Good evening. Everything's working, I can see.
And Councillor Seaton.
I can see and hear proceedings, thank you.
Cheers, Councillor Seaton. They are the panel members, and we also have Councillor Barclay, who's lead member for finance, in attendance. Councillor Barclay, can you confirm you can hear and see?
Good evening, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, we have some officers in attendance to help with the committee with their deliberations. I have firstly Simon Jackson, Strategic Director.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear proceedings.
Cheers, thank you. Leslie Tansey, Head of Financial Services.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Nikki Conway, Democratic Services Officer. Okay, and I've got Ed Brown, Democratic Services Officer.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear proceedings.
Cheers, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. That gets preliminaries out of the way. Item one I have is apologies. None received prior to the meeting, and I think everybody's here. So I'll move on to item two, which is disclosures of pecuniary and personal interests. Does any members have anything to declare? I don't see any hands going up, so we'll move on to item 4. Questions under other committee procedures 12.8. No questions were submitted, which means we move on to item 5, which is the period for monitoring report. And I'm going to ask Leslie Tansey to introduce the report.
Sorry, Chair, through you, Chair. There's also the declarations party whip, of which none have been received, just to make sure we keep. To make sure we see it on the agenda. Sorry.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Ed. Yeah, declaration of the party whip. I don't see any hands going up. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 4.
Okay, would you like me to share the screen to present the report? Oops. Where's it gone? Sorry, it's not actually coming on at the moment.
Me and Leslie practiced this about 15 minutes ago, so.
Can you actually see the
Not
report
yet,
now?
I'm afraid.
Can't see anything at the moment, no.
Do you want me to have a go at sharing it, Leslie?
Yeah, just bear with me one
Okay.
second. I'll just try one more time, Simon.
Simon, whilst that's happening, could you just tell me what a profile budget is?
So a profile, if you say the budget is 120,000 a year, so just a flat budget would be £10,000 a month. But
Okay.
if it's something like income, and if it's a shop, then you're going to make 50% of your sales in November and December. You increase the budget in those months. So you don't get a straight line 10,000 a month. You might get 5,000 in a few months, and couple of months you might get 30 or 40,000. So it just really is a budget to reflect the seasonality of the expenditure or income, really.
Okay, thank you.
You should be able to all see the report now on the screen, so I can
Now,
just
thank you, Leslie. Yes.
Yeah, we can.
introduce that one. Thank you. So this is the revenue monitoring report, sort of as at the 31st of July. So that's from April to July. So it's the monitoring report that goes to SLT. It includes heads of service comments, and it actually now filters through to finance and corporate reporting scrutiny. The first point to mention is the general fund. At period 4, the actual spend was 6,730,000 against a budget of 6,737,000. So that's a very small underspend. So at period 4, we're actually on target in terms of the actual general fund monitoring position. As part of the monitoring position, we do actually manage. We have a managed savings target. We've got an annual target of 527,000. So we anticipate over a period of time, every month we actually budget monitor those savings and claw back those savings. So as at period 4, we had a budget, a profile budget of 176,000. To date, or at period 4, we've actually clawed back 144,000. So we have got a small shortfall at the moment on there. Whilst it's early in the financial year, we wouldn't normally put a forecast in the report at this stage. We will do a full forecast at period 7, but we have highlighted some financial pressures so far, and as part of the budget monitoring, we're looking to mitigate some of these pressures. Some of them, the top 2 planning related, have already been discussed with SLT. That's 180,000. The car park income shortfall, at the moment that's projected to be 107,000 shortfall. What we have done to mitigate some of the income lines, we've actually put a claim into DCLG for the first quarter. So we can actually, we've put a claim in for 275,000, not just on car park income, but across the board. And we were successful in that grant claim last year. So there's no reason not to be successful for the first quarter. We're only allowed to actually claim the first quarter income as part of sort of the government initiative. Some other savings are listed on the table 1. I won't go through them all, but as you can see, we've highlighted some of the main ones so far. As I say, as part of the monitoring, we are looking to mitigate those. There will be, by working from home, there will be some other cost savings as well to offset that. And also against the commercial income, even though we've got additional income from the vaccination centre, we have earmarked a reserve this year to top up. We've created a reserve. So last year it was 400,000, and we're looking at offsetting some further funds to sort of protect us and mitigate us from any sort of shortfalls in the commercial income lines in the future. So we are putting some sort of buffers in place for that. So just moving on, I won't go through all the detail, but table 2, I will take some questions afterwards. But table 2 is the head of service comments in terms of where we are currently at this point in the year. And then I'll swiftly go down to the HRA. The HRA, currently we've got an underspend of 81,000. Within the HRA, there are the managed vacancy savings. It looks like that annual target will certainly be achieved this year. The only other thing to say on the HRA at the moment is some of the void rents are currently sort of falling behind the profile. So the housing rents, the void losses at 4.8% compared to a budget of 2.7%. So the voids at this point in time have we're basically in a shortfall position. And then the only other thing to sort of highlight in the tables below is you can see sort of the garages as well are actually not hitting their targets. We are looking at the HRA 30-year business plan, so that's coming forward in the autumn, and we've commissioned 2 companies to look at that 30-year business plan, which is being presented to, or has been presented to SLT. So that's a very quick introduction, but if there are any questions on any of the report, I think myself, Councillor Barclay and Simon will happy to take those comments. Thank you.
Okay, if you can put your virtual hand up and I'll scroll through the screens that I have, because obviously the screen is being shared. So what I'll do is I'll first scroll both screens that I have. Councillor Bolton, I see you first, and then if there's anybody else, please put your hands up. And then I've got Councillor Hamilton after that.
Thank you, Chair. I guess this is not so much a question as an observation. We've got anticipated underspend of 7,000, but when you then look through the detailed table, the general fund monitoring, there's an awful lot of sort of unders and overs that go through to make up that 7,000. And I think I've probably made this point each year that I've been on this panel, that 7,000 is great, but it does concern me that we have so many ups and downs that make up that number. So, you know, that is an observation, I guess, rather than a specific question. But if anybody would like to comment on that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
I mean, I can answer that, Councillor Bolton. I mean, at this stage in the monitoring period 4, obviously it is early in the period. I think obviously we set in the budgets, we go through and set them as close to as we can. I think with some of the effects of COVID, it is slightly difficult. Things like the car parks, there's been some decisions made to try and encourage people back into the town centre. So we have offered free car parking for a period of time. So that's having an effect on the budget. So there are some things in there. The local plan transport costs, that was something that's happened since we set the budget. So I do appreciate your comment. I don't know whether Simon or Councillor Barclay have got any other comments to make on that observation, but that you're quite right.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I through you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's true. A lot of the basically about the heads of service when we're setting the budget, and that they put their budget forward, and quite a lot of this ups and downs have come as a result of unexpected costs when we set the budget originally. You can see with planning, for instance, there's 100,000 overspend forecast. Now, whether or not they could have seen that at the beginning of the year, I don't know. I certainly take the point, and we're coming to budget setting for 22-23, I think further on in the paper, but this at the moment We are underspent by 7,000 at period 4. We're trying to highlight potential issues going forward. We're tracking the MTFS, and I think Simon will go through that later on. Our reserves are still fairly robust, but yeah, I take the point. And it is a question of getting closer to the reality. Very difficult. I think we've got a gross budget of about 40 million. But it isn't easy to get it absolutely right. But it's a fair point, and I take it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barclay. I've got Councillor Hamilton next, and then I'll move down the list. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This is what I'm really seeing here is almost like an update on a question I asked on this subject in a different committee earlier on this year. It's about the car allowance savings scheme. Now you've got a potential, you call it a potential shortfall of 200k. Now my understanding that's just an estimate because you're still under consultation with staff and trade unions and that. Now I believe there was meant to be a report going to Cabinet on this in October. Is that still the case? And therefore, will we have a clearer idea of what the actual potential saving will be soon, as it were, within the coming weeks?
So shall I answer that one?
Simon, yes, Dom.
Yeah, so an essential car user, it's not a cabinet report. So actually, as it happens, there is a we've developed over time, and it is I won't go into the detail, but it is a complex subject, and there's been quite a lot of discussion amongst ourselves as sort of the corporate leadership team. But there is a proposal going to the trade union, to joint management trade union meeting, as it's called, tomorrow, literally tomorrow morning, with our proposals. Those proposals, having looked at it in some detail, would save us, if all accepted and agreed, would save us around about 100,000 a year. So that's now, in terms of implementation, assuming if it is agreed in a reasonably timely fashion, and it is a negotiation, so there's obviously not necessarily a guarantee on that. But if we were to agree it would the revised scheme would come to Personnel Committee before Christmas, and then just late-ish December, and then we would have a 3-month implementation period. So people would need 3 months' notice. So it would come into effect with a reasonable following wind as from 1st of April 2022. So there'll be no savings this year. It's basically impossible to get any savings this year, given the 3-month notice period we're required to give for contractual changes or for terms and conditions changes of that nature. And then it'll be probably 100,000 or so subsequently. And when we get to the MTFS tracker, I won't necessarily dwell on the detail, but that's the sort of thing we've got within the MTFS tracker. So we can maybe discuss how those sort of things are reflected through into the future years, and obviously will inform budget setting for next year as well.
Okay, so that clarifies things for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. I've got Councillor Parsons next, please.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask 2 questions at the moment and reserve the opportunity to come back later in a little more detail? Right at the very beginning, I'd just like some clarification on the second sentence on the general fund position 4, period 4, appendix 1 introduction. The actual expenditure at period 4, including commitments, is 6730k. Can I ask what commitments means and how much is actually spent? Because in theory, all the money's committed, and sometimes we'll have commitments, but they may not crystallize even in this financial year. So are we able to break down how much has actually been spent at the end of July of that 6 million or 6.73 million, as opposed to what's committed?
Hi, Leslie, do you want to take that?
I can answer that, Councillor Parsons. Obviously, that is the commitments are sort of orders that are placed on the system that, in terms of up to period 4, it sort of captures all the sort of contract expenditure that's not actually yet been paid. When we actually do this exercise, we'd sort of do a thorough trawl through the orders. I haven't got those figures completely at hand now, but I can certainly give you that breakdown of what's actual spend and what's actually committed, added together, and I can certainly put that in a report going forward, so it's a bit clearer.
It's just to avoid the use of the word commitment, and then that word commitment keeps saying that we're close to being on track, and then all of a sudden the commitments don't crystallize, and all of a sudden there's a massive underspend at the end of the financial year, because we kept saying it was a committed funding, but it never crystallized in that financial year. So I'd just like clarity on that, so that we know what we've actually spent against what we said we were going to spend on a like-for-like basis, as opposed to the commitments which may or may not crystallize eventually. And the second point is, did I understand correctly from what you said that the DCLG claim is only going to be for the first quarter? So therefore, if there are continued car park fee losses against budget, they will not be able to be claimed, because the DCLG claim is only for first quarter expenditure.
That is correct. The DCLG have not put any further guidance out to say that we can claim any further than the first quarter. I mean, whether or not we get any further communications on that, but last year we were able to claim the whole year of the income losses. At this moment in time, we're not anticipating to get any more than the 275. One thing is that we haven't actually put that as a budget. So in effect, there's a 658 pressures that we've got, obviously net off the 275. So we've got 383 at the moment between those two figures. And as I say, we are monitoring these budgets, and one thing that we do is we actually, we've got a environment policy. So I think one of the points that Councillor Bolton raised about, we've got lots of ups and downs. We in terms of the heads of service, do follow the environment policy rules, where if they are going to overspend in one area ongoing, then we are looking for environments, and we're looking very closely at when we're looking at the budgets for the new year, we are looking at patterns of over and underspends and trying to get those budgets back in line. But I think these sort of fairly large amounts here, we just wanted to flag those up at this point in time. So I think the buildings feasibility, that's one that has been identified as actually coming out of the reinvestment reserve, but we've just put it in there for sort of clarity, really.
Okay, I'll stop there for now and allow others to ask questions, but I just wanted to clarify those 2 points early on. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Councillor Parsons. I've got Councillor Seaton next, please.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons, for the commitments. That was going to be one of my questions, with the same as the profiled. I didn't quite understand, but I do now. The other one I just wanted to ask was is the head of strategic support and the 50k, which is a one-off Brexit grant, and it's not yet allocated. Sorry, that's on page 7, almost to the end of the graph. Mm-hmm. It's not yet allocated. Is it up to us where we allocate it then, or is it for a specific reason, and why isn't it allocated?
Simon, you're on mute. Did you want to answer that?
Simon, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, apologies. I do sound better on mute, actually.
We understood everything you said.
No, so yes, it was allocated to us, and it was allocated to us before the Brexit deal was finalised. So, we didn't know we didn't have a particular plan, although obviously at that time there were various things that could have happened. So, immediate supply chain issues, etc. Some of which are probably occurring now, but there potentially could have been an immediate shock. So we got allocated that money beforehand. We've still got that money, so 50,000 doesn't necessarily take it that far, but we have potentially got that money to allocate going forward. And I believe it's not a ring fence grant, so we can do what we like with it. And I believe we can possibly ultimately keep it. I don't think there's any requirement on us to keep a record of the spend and return it. But at the moment, it's sitting there, and we are obviously having these various supply chain issues, and you pays your money and takes your choice as to what the explanation is. But I think, given the circumstances at the moment, we'd probably like to keep it for a little while longer, just as an amount of money that we can apply.
It was really just to establish whether it is ring fenced to be spent on a specific thing, but you don't think it is.
It was the idea was it was to mitigate issues arising from Brexit, and particularly in the context of had there been a no deal at 31st December last year.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers, thank you, Brenda. I've got Councillor Parton next.
Because I've not actually sat on this committee before, you will think some of these questions are quite basic. Could you firstly re-explain the process of looking at these figures? I wrote down that these figures are from April to July, and now we're in October. So between July and now, you said that the figures are discussed by the senior leadership team. Could you just elaborate there on what happens? I noticed there's comments next to them. There was mention of another filter that they go through. And can you outline what that process is? The second question relates regarding the fact that you, and this does actually go into the next item, the MTFS impacts, but when you're talking about loss of car parking, you're actually looking at also in the next item about loss of income from the town centre. I think we need to be pragmatic and realise that we're actually going to experience prolonged loss of income in the town centre well into next year, until the summer, maybe in good weather, when the public see the benefits of the redeveloped town centre, and also a knock-on effect with the car parks as well.
Okay, so in terms of a process, so basically a lot of the postings to the accounting ledgers happens automatically, and then when we do the detail, and every month we get some numbers out, and we can look at them, but in periods 4 and 7 and 10 we do a much more detailed exercise now. So this is up to period 4, so the end of July. So all the postings, so the things like the payment runs and invoices we pay, all get onto the ledgers automatically, and then we do an exercise looking to calculate things like the commitments, to look at where we've actually in reality spent the money but not had an invoice yet. So we then go through that process. We then see what the numbers look like. We ask the heads of service for their views on where they think income and expenditure is going, and then it goes to SLT, and it has come here. So there is an accounting exercise, and then there is an exercise of running it through the heads of service to get their views. And actually car parking is a very good example of that. So we're looking to get the head of service view about what's happened. There are some factors that we didn't budget for, or some decisions taken we didn't budget for, around supporting the town centre and offering free car parking for a longer period of time. And then it's come through here for us to look at. Now it's period 4, so on the 31st of July, you don't have any numbers you can discuss quite as early as that. Period 4 does seem quite a long time ago now. We have got period 5 and 6 numbers, but without going through that detailed exercise. But we will be doing that detailed exercise again for period 7, which is the end of October. And again, just going on to the car parking and the MTFS, you're sort of quite right. And this is one of the challenges we have. We've got to take a view on what's going to happen to car parking income over the next 2 or 3 years. And particularly at the moment with COVID, to what extent is car parking going to come back to its previous levels? So that's the general backdrop. And of course, there's the Bedford Square's happening at the moment. So as you say, obviously we'd hope that next summer that's all complete, and that any negative impact of Bedford Square is washing through, and we're back to a new normal. But again, with lots of these things, what is the new normal? And that's the sort of some of the things that we're wrestling with, and maybe we'll touch on that a little bit more when we look at the MTFS.
Could I ask one more question for now? Could you outline at what point legal are advised senior management team of the figures and what their view is on how budgets are likely to run, and how much are they involved in terms of steering where possibly our budgets go and pressures? Or is that mainly the audit team?
It's a finance function. It's not really a legal services function.
I think we will leave that thread there. Thank you, Councillor Parton, for your questions there. Before we go on further round robin of questions, I just had a couple of observations to make. Leslie or Simon, if you could answer them, or Tom. Voids. I just want to touch on voids, and I think that is one that Leslie, you touched on. Gone up from 2.7 to 4.8%. When you look at the paperwork, it's about £360,000 worth of loss. How are we tackling that? That's my first question.
Through you, Chair, I think that's really a question for the housing team rather than a pure financing. This is just simply reporting factual information. I'm certainly not in a position to be able to answer what the housing team are doing to try and rent out properties that are void. Yeah, it is clearly an issue, and I'm sure that they'll be doing everything they can to increase the income. Specifically what action they're taking, I don't know. These are obviously properties which have become vacant that they haven't rented out. How much impact that is due to COVID, I don't know, but I couldn't answer that, to be frank. I'm not sure that Simon or Leslie could.
No, I think Councillor Barclay summed that up pretty well. I think one of the COVID is, I think, an issue, because obviously we've got a backlog of repairs, and we've had some difficulties in terms of the operatives getting into people's houses, and how that's flowed through to voids, I'm not sure, but certainly it's an issue that's we understand, and the director and relevant head of service are certainly working on it.
Yeah, I think what we've really tried to show here in the period 4 with the estimated additional net financial pressures for the rest of the year is the scenarios as it could play out. And as they said, we've got 658 potential pressures. We've put in for the DCGLG £275,000, so that will reduce it to 383. Then if you take out the estimated essential car user allowance, which is, we did think it was going to be realised that day, that brings it down to 183. And then if you take off the additional 100,000 from overspends on planning, That takes it down to 83,000. And it becomes more realistic. But I think what we're trying to do here is present a realistic a picture to keep all members on the panel informed of what they are. Now, how it will eventually play out, I can't tell you, but I think this is an honest appraisal of where we're going, and as up to date and realistic for projecting ahead till March 2022 as we can do at this stage. I think there's been some good questions. I think they're valid, but what we really are trying to do is give you the realistic scenario of what could and could not be and the reasons behind it.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Councillor Barker, for that one. My question was really just to find out if we had any plans to tackle any of these shortfalls. And I think you've gone through some of them there. And by all means, we can ask this the question again later on in one of our other meetings. I just want to make another observation on the rent arrears, which is the paragraph below the void percentages, which is on page 8. Which is actually, a positive. It's saying that rents arrears have decreased £88,000 since July 2020, and former tenant rents have reduced by 35,000 over the same period. So that's a positive, and that's good to take. However, and we have to balance this with the news that's come today, with potentially with more of our claimants going on to universal credit, and it's an ever-growing number, and then with the loss of the £20 a week as of this week. Can I have some observations from officers what they think? Is this a realistic forecast for your year end, or do we think it's going to get worse? And if so, how much worse? Thank you.
Is it realistic? Yes. So will the universal credit reduction hit some of our tenants? No doubt. I guess what I don't know is how many of them that will affect. We've got quite a few of our tenants are retired, so quite a large number are retired. Quite a large number are on housing benefits, so the rent is completely covered by housing benefits. So actually, I think from memory, about half of the rents are just covered purely by benefits anyway. So the issues are, in a way, the issues relate to the other 50% of rent. So, I think undoubtedly it will have an impact. Probably the end of furlough may have an impact as well. So I think we recognise these. It's one of these things where what's the new normal and how do things come out of sort of COVID and the pandemic? Because a lot of these things you can sort of envisage, but might be quite a slow burn. So things like council tax arrears hasn't particularly affected us so far, but you can see some of the factors just spoken about just then may start affecting council tax collections in the sort of second half of this year and into next year. But it's very, we've not been in a normal situation for several months now, well over a year. So we are sort of groping our way forward. So certainly on the rents, the rents is a more positive story, and maybe more positive than we're expecting. Whereas voids is obviously still a struggle. I think as we sort of go forward and get more data and maybe a bit more understanding of trends, then obviously these things will get refined. And the main exercise we do for that will be an update of the NTFS, which will come forward in the new year.
Okay, thank you, Simon, for that one. I just wanted to see if we'd had any thoughts and planning towards the latter half of the year, because I think, as somebody's pointed out, it's easy to have a look at the figures 4 months in, realistically, and then add on all the potential spends you're going to have, and come at a figure at you're only 7,000 underspent, but we've still got 8 more months to go, which is a substantial amount of time to go. So yeah, we'll take that with a pinch of salt. Any other further questions? Any other hands?
Chair, through you, if I may, I wouldn't take it with a pinch of salt, because these are the figures, and that's where we are now. And officers have gone to a great deal of time and trouble to try to present to the Budget Scrutiny Panel realistic figures, and even gone to the extent of going to the year end. They haven't got the power of prophecy, neither have I, neither of you, neither of any members of the panel, but I wouldn't want there to be pinches of salt anywhere. These are genuine, what we believe to be the case at the moment. So please, let's be realistic. We're trying to be honest with you and tell you what the facts are.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barclay. Any other members? I've got Councillor Parsons.
Thank you very much. I've got 2 or 3 more questions, please. Just going down, first of all, I continue to remain extraordinarily concerned around the sums of money involved in the planning department that we seem to either overspend or not get in income over the last few years. You know, I can remember a significant amount of money went in for a restructure to deliver better figures, which it didn't. And we're looking at the first 100K of overspend already. I've got a slight dilemma with the wording and the numbers, if I can just see clarity on that. The wording is that it's an overspend at year end, but I'm assuming because it's here now, it's already been spent and is crystallised by end period 4.
If I can just answer that, Councillor Parsons. I think as part of the budget monitoring process, we do ask officers for obviously information. This particular 100,000 is actually been reported at SLT as a position that they do need to spend another 100,000 on the local plan for transport costs. So even though it's there now, in terms of it being spent, it's certainly committed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a subtle one. It's sort of, we've been told that they need to spend this money on transport modelling and that it will cost 100,000. In contrast to the accounting commitment, it's not actually, we haven't actually had it yet, and it's not actually in the ledgers, so it's slightly different. But in terms of a year-end forecast, the planners say that the county insists that we need to have some additional highways modelling, and it will cost us £100,000 to do it. So that wasn't in the budget. So hence, this is where that particular lump of cash, the reason why that lump of cash is required.
It just highlights the issue that it is a line of questioning for tonight that I've taken on a couple of issues because of the way I've read this report. It's unclear to me throughout the report where we've actually spent money up to period 4 or whether it's a projection. So I'm looking at that 100,000 and I've got no idea whether we've spent it in period 4 because it's in a period 4 report or whether it's a projection. And I'm guessing, looking at the wording describing a number of these figures, I think some of them have been spent and some of them are just projections going forward, but it's unclear to me which is which. So when I get to the bottom line total for what is meant to be a figure in period 4, I'm unsure whether it's a real figure or a guess of a future underspend back projected for period 4. So that 100,000 may or may not have gone, but we're using it in the total general fund underspend up to period 4 of 7K. And I've got no idea whether it's gone out or it's not gone out. So I don't know how realistic that figure is for reporting period 4 to me tonight. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, okay. So the 7K is what we've actually spent. That's versus the budget. So that's actually what we've spent up to period 4. Then what we've sought to do is say, right, that's where we are at period 4. Where are we going to be at the year end? So if in a sort of not a budget that's not creating any particular issues, then we'll have spent an amount up to period 4, and we assume it will continue spending on that pattern towards the year end, and that's fine. Some of them have been spent, so the planning, local plan development has been spent sort of in accordance with the budget up to period 4, but the planning service have highlighted to us, well, actually, you know, we've got this extra £100,000 lump of costs. So, you know, in terms of the year-end projection, we need to add that on. So
yeah, what the confusion is, Simon, you understand the confusion. That's a projection of 100 grand to year end, but that's being used to tally the figure of underspend up to period 4. That's parking.
No, that's not the case.
Well, how can the bottom of the column be total general fund underspend 7K? by the end of period 4 if that 100k is being used in that column,
It
but
isn't.
it's not.
It
It's
isn't,
not being
it isn't.
used. So those numbers aren't being added up.
Is this the project? Sorry, I'm trying to work out where the. Maybe not looking at quite the right bit of the report. These
I'm
are
looking at the
these-
general
these-
fund monitoring period 4 table. And the second column is a row of numbers, is a column of numbers of overspends and underspends. And the bottom of that column says that at the end of period 4, the total general fund underspend to end of period 4 is 7k. But
No,
in
that's
that
head of
column-
waste.
no, total general fund underspend is at the bottom of the table.
It's on page 7, Brenda.
There's 100k in that column, which is being added up or subtracted in that column to arrive at the quarter period 4 figure of 7k, but that 100k is not spent yet. But it's being used to make the figure look closer for the general fund underspend right now. If that 100k wasn't there because it's not been spent by the end of July, that would be saying 107,000. We're using a figure that aren't live and current to make the figure look close and tight, when in fact it's not. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not as tight as it is. That the column and the numbers are not the same numbers in the column.
I think if
Can, through,
put some clarity on that, Councillor Parsons, that 100k is a figure that the head of service has gone to SLT and said that 100k is going to be spent. I think if we hadn't put that in there, then we'd obviously not be. It's almost part of the commitments. Like I think I explained in the one of your earlier questions that you asked for a breakdown of spend to date and commitments. That would be in that commitment figure.
Right,
so I can get that split for you.
Can I just come in? Sorry, guys.
About that.
Councillor Parsons, can I just come in a second, just to further your point a little bit? What I would have wanted to see is that period 4 spend, actual spend, and then period 4 actual budget. So if it was split by 12 months, if it's a 12 period, I think it is, what we would have been under and over on all of these. So that £100,000, even though the director of planning wanted 100,000, where would that fit in the period? Would it be split over 12 months or 8 months if he came in April to ask for it? I wouldn't expect that to be plumped into the period 4 report. All 100,000 of it, maybe an eighth of it, because potentially an eighth of it might have been spent by then, or a 12th of it if it's spread over 12 months, but not the full 100,000. And I think that's why I said a pinch of salt, because what you've presented is with a period 4 spend, but then lumped on the other 8 periods to come to say, actually, if we spent all the money in the next 8 period, would just be £7,000 underspent on our budget, which I said.
I'm not using the phrase pinch of salt. I'm sure the figures are real, and the figures are what people believe and are supported by hard fact. But the reality is that column is not a series of like-for-like figures which give a figure of 7 as the underspend by the end of period 4. That's not good accounting presentation of those numbers to me as a layperson. That's not correct. I'm as blunt as saying it's not the right way to be presenting those numbers to me as a layperson. That's just not right at the end of period 4. I'm sorry, I can't get past that. It's not right. I've got a similar observation, if I can make it, because it's in the same vein, over the HRA. I'm struggling with the top of the column on the HRA figures, which says, if I can just find the appropriate page as I'm skimming through the numbers. Excuse me, sorry, I'm just going up and down as I try and get to the right column. I'm struggling with a phrase at the top of the column which says actual income due as opposed to actual income received. Now, if they're one and the same, I'm a happy bunny again. But if actual income due in that column is not the same for the period presented to me as actual income received, I'm struggling again. I'm struggling as a layperson to make sense of that set of numbers. So I don't know if you can see clarity on that, whether that's actual income received, which would make sense to me. But if it's actual income due, that's I'm
We haven't had it.
almost nonsensical.
On page
Which
10,
which part of the report?
it's page 10, appendix, the first appendix.
The very first column, the second column, I'm sorry, but the first column of numbers, it says actual income due, not actual income received. So we might have been due 7.4 million, but we might have only had 58 pence. I don't know that as a layperson when I read that column heading. And I'm concerned if I'm scrutinising a budget that I know what we've had, not what someone thinks we're due. And again, I don't think that's unreasonable of me. Well, I don't understand. So, I mean, can anyone offer an explanation? Or am I
Leslie,
wrong?
if you scroll down a little bit more, it's on page 10.
Top of page 10,
yeah,
appendix.
Yeah.
Is that something we can seek clarity on for the next meeting?
Certainly, Councillor Seaton.
It's this one, this table here.
Oh, yes.
It's not because I just don't understand. So I need to understand why it says due, not income received.
I think that's. I mean, I will see clarity. That's actually the budget. So that's the actual budget, and that's the actual void loss. But I'll certainly speak to the HRA accountant and make that clear for next time.
Yeah, I think some of our column headings, in fairness, aren't very helpful in having talked through them. I think some of the column headings aren't very helpful actually. So that's something. I think there is a presentational thing we can work on.
Yeah.
For sure.
That certainly is the budget, but I'll certainly talk to the HRA accountant and get that amended for the next report.
Can I just ask something similar on page 11? And again, it's just seeking clarity. So the first 2 years on page 11, table C, if I use that as the example.
Yes.
2020, 2021, 2020, 2021. I take it those are complete years. That's the closed off year numbers for 2021.
Well, in terms of the numbers, you've got 2020, you've got 541, and then you've got.
I understand. Yeah, I'm just saying that's
Yes.
for the year. That's for the complete. So the 21, 22 columns, are those the numbers to date to period 4, July? Or are those projections to the end of 21, 22?
They'd be projected, wouldn't they?
I think that's a year-on-year comparison at period 4, Councillor Parsons. Looking at that, but again, the headings in the report are not very clear at all. So again,
those are the numbers up to period 4. That's a live period 4 number, 582.
I think that's the actual full year position. The 31 and the 33. I think they're sort of comparable numbers.
But
between
again,
the two.
it can't be current tenant arrears because 21, 22 is not finished yet. It can't be a year-end figure. It can only be a live figure, surely.
I think they're both at a point in time actually. So at the end of the year, it's a column heading issue. So I think at the end of 31 March 2021, there were 541 dwellings that owed less than £150. Owed less than £150, totaling 31,000. And at the end of period 4, there were 582 that owed £33,000. So just a bit of an increase. So I think it is a column heading thing, but I think we are looking at snapshot at a point in time. So you can see so comparing it, I suppose it backs up the story a little bit. The overall arrears have actually fallen a little bit in that 4 months. So you can see, so if you look sort of yes, that's right. The arrears have fallen slightly from 7,459 to 747. So things have improved, but I think you're quite right. So some clarity on column headings and precisely what those are would be helpful. I'm pretty sure actually it's a snapshot at a point in time, but the column headings would help there.
Okay. I'll stop now for a second, Councillor Meir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons, for that one. And I think what we have to take from here, I think we definitely need to look at some of these headings and the way it's presented to us. But also, if you're showing us a live report up to the end of period 4, it'd be nice to see actually period 4. That's what it was. Period 4 budget. This is what it was supposed to be, because I don't think we can actually scrutinise something that potentially might happen in the next 8 months. Because there's too many variables, as somebody mentioned as well, and things may slip or things may get spent quicker. Okay, any other questions on this piece of paper? I think Leslie and Simon have got our, got
Chair,
about the headings.
One
yes, Councillor Barton.
Yeah, one recommendation to be minuted. Earlier on, it was discussed by yourself regarding voids, and we were told it wasn't really the forum here to discuss it. Can I ask that it's minuted that it's recommended that precise point is scrutinised by the Housing Management Advisory Board as a matter of urgency?
I would just before that's a very good suggestion, but it is actually being scrutinised by Performance Scrutiny. They had a paper to it at the last Performance Scrutiny, and voids do go to them periodically, I think every 6 months. So it is being looked over at a scrutiny committee. And I think, Councillor Parton, if you wanted to find out further about that one, it would be worthwhile having a look. My question was just to see if the finance team had got any inklings of what would happen, what was happening, and if that figure would actually be reduced by the end of the year. But I'll take on Councillor Barclay's point that actually it's the housing team that do that, and we will take, we're just here to scrutinise the figures themselves, but we can still ask questions as to why the figures are there and if anything can be done to mitigate or stem some of the losses in the voids. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Parton?
The only issue, the only benefit, the added benefit, appreciate it seems we're going off tangent here. The HMAB is also staffed by tenants, a tenant body as well, so they can also see it as well as just members in performance scrutiny.
I'm sorry, I really don't think the Housing Management Advisory Board is the forum. The voids is a performance issue. I mean, from a tenant, I don't know, I've got to be honest, I don't know what the terms of reference are for the Housing Management Advisory Board, but I would be very surprised if it was to be around voids, and it's a much better fit for it to be at the Finance and Performance Scrutiny Committee, which, as Councillor Meir has pointed out, that's where it will be, it's already on that agenda to be looked at.
Okay. Thank you, Simon.
Through you, Chair, this is something that if you wish, we could take away with us anyway and have a look at what the HMAB terms of reference are, and also see if we can provide a response to that question to you, aside from what you're doing in budget scrutiny.
I think that ordinarily, if we were in a committee, in a scrutiny committee, yes, but I think here we're just specifically looking at budget scrutiny and the budget presented to us. I don't think we are looking to delegate any work to any other committees, but also if we did make any recommendations, it would be to Scrutiny Commission and also the Cabinet itself, and ultimately they would make the decisions there, whether it went.
I've took note anyway, Nick, so.
Yes. Councillor Bolton, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Councillor Seaton and I both sit on the Housing Management Advisory Board, and we meet every 2 months, and part of the agenda pack for our meeting is performance
Okay.
information. So we do actually get very detailed information about voids, about rent arrears. But we are simply an advisory board. We're not any form of decision-making board. But I just thought it was worth flagging that up.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bolton, and thank you, Councillor Seaton, as well. And as you've mentioned, Councillor Seaton, you have taken note, and you can always pick that up in that advisory board or advisory capacity.
My hands up as well. It wasn't just for that.
Yeah, Councillor Seaton, go for it.
Mayor. So out of this, we recommended that the columns, so that we can understand them a bit better, are looked at. And will it be represented then, so that we can understand the figures? And yes, I used to, as you know, teach maths, and it's all in the words, isn't it? And you, Simon and Leslie, eat and drink this, and you know exactly what you're looking at, and A, take away B, etc. But of course we don't know. So any help on making it sort of suitable for idiots, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. I saw you laughing there, Colin. And what have we established then for this 100k? Are we asking for a more of a detailed response from planning of what they have spent and what they've not spent, and how much is projected and how much they've used of this 100k? I'm not quite sure where we are with that discussion or what we've put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Seaton. I think Leslie Tansey mentioned that there would be another report up to the end of period 6 or 7 in October.
I think
it's period 7 report.
Period 7 report. I think that would be the report that, if you were going to update the column headings and make them more reader friendly, that would be the one, not this one, because we'll be working on the other this new one. As opposed to the 100,000 and what's that been spent on. I think that's probably a question for our January meeting, and I'll tell you why. Because we need to give them the opportunity to actually have spent that money or budgeted to spend that money before we can scrutinise them. I don't think it'll be fair to call Richard Bennett in front of us to say, actually, how much have you spent, what are the plans for it, because we're looking at the budget itself and the spends in the budget, and anything specific we can call them, but we're looking at the budget actually for next year. This is information to give us an inkling and an understanding of the budget making process. Councillor Bolton.
Sorry, Councillor Mear, you said this is something for discussion at our January meeting. Do you not mean the December meeting?
Sorry, I did mean December. Apologies. And hopefully on that period 7 report, we would have more of an update on that spend, and then we could question further. Councillor Barclay, you have your hand up. Is that? Yeah,
it is up. What I say is that column 2, table 2, as I understand it, that shows what the 7,000 underspend, the reasons behind it. And you can see the table 1 has various figures in it. And the only figures from table 1 that are included in the monitoring report for period 4 are listed in there. And part of that is 100,000 for planning. But what the report, as I understand it, is trying to do is make the committee, budget scrutiny committee, aware of what other things during the rest of the year could come forward. But as I understand it, this table shows you out of those additional ones, which has been included to date. Now, whether they've spent it or not, it appears to be included in period 4, but there are still other things to come through. So I think they have tried to summarise that to show you where this £7,000 underspend, what the overs and unders have actually contributed towards it. And actually adding that up, I believe, is actually meant to show a £7,000 underspend. Now, whether that's just coincidental or not is another matter, but maybe less.
I think Councillor Parsons is right, really. I think that to be honest, that 100,000 probably shouldn't be in there, and I think it is. I think it is. I think certainly for period 7, some clarity. I think what we've done is merged figures together to come up with a sort of a year-end type estimate, but I don't think it's probably helpful to have merged those things. So I think splitting those out so there is more clarity in period 7 is probably a good practice thing we ought to do. So
really what we're saying is that if we hadn't included that 100,000 additional, we would actually be underspent by 107,000, even though we know these other things are coming through.
I think if my math is correct, we'd have been underspent. Yeah, we'd have been underspent by 107. I think would be.
I think it's again in the effort to try and show what the year end is. Yeah, I fully take your point. 100,000.
The other problem is the 100 may be a different 100. So the narrative, there's 100 underspend. The 100 underspend. I think the planning team are saying, well, actually, we're going to be overspent by 100. So those two numbers match, which probably adds to the confusion. So I think just clarity about what's in that column or not.
I think at period 7 we will be doing an actual and a forecast, and maybe we should have done a period 4 actual and a forecast, but the forecast at period 4 is very difficult at this moment in time. But we will, as we've always done, is do an actual position at period 7 and a forecast at period 7. So that 100,000 will be in there at period 7 as a forecast, unless planning tell me otherwise at this moment in time.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I think what's causing the confusion is this 100,000 overspend is included in. You could argue we've done ourselves down by including it at this time.
The more I look at it, I think actually the 100,000 underspend is just coincidental. So I think we've got an actual underspend period 4, and then a forecast of 100,000 overspend, which obviously match. But going back to the point, I think it does look confusing, and some better clarity over the presentation, I think, is something we'll do. For period 7.
I think through you, Chair. So in other words, what we're saying is 100,000 underspend, or sort of overspend in. A total 100,000 overspend at year end is due to forecast. This was not anticipated. So we put it as an overspend rather too early.
Well, I think at period. I think what's happened, and we will clarify this. I think that what's happened is at the end of period 4, the planning team, the planning services underspent by 100,000. But in the comments, what they're saying is because of this transport modelling, which has been to SLT, so there is a specific job to do on transport modelling. What they're saying is actually at the year end will be 100,000 over. So in reality, if we hadn't had the transport modelling, what they'd be saying is at the year end we'd be on budget. But so I think that's actually what the situation is, having looked at it. But it is confusing, and as I say, it is incumbent on us to maybe clarify those numbers. So I think the numbers are probably right and the narrative's right, but putting the two side by side is understandably a recipe for a bit of confusion on this one.
Yeah.
Councillor Meir, you're muted.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. So, panel members, we were asked to note the report. It's verbally using a roll call. So, if you just, Councillor Bolton, agree to note the report.
Yeah, happy to note the report, Chair.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to note the report.
Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, I note the report.
Councillor Parton.
Noted.
And Councillor Seaton.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's unanimous on that one. So we will now move on to item 6, which is the MTFS tracker, review of the MTFS position. Simon, are you going to take us through that one? Oh, sorry, Ed,
Yes.
do you want to come in?
Quick through you, Chair. Just before we go ahead, can I just clarify for the minutes that that's noted, but with the recommendation of clarifying the figures for period 7 at the next meeting?
Not clarifying, putting them, yes, put them in different headings as discussed.
Improving the presentation or clarifying the presentation within the table columns. Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers. Thank you, Ed. Simon, would you like to take us through item 6, please?
Yes. So I will share this. So let's have a look, get this right. Oh, there you go. So you have got this in hard copy. It's not necessarily in terms of a PDF, it's not necessarily that user friendly. So we've also sent you the live spreadsheet to have a look at, which I sort of do apologize. It is a little bit complicated, but you know, where we are is a little bit complicated. So I'll just try and take us through the summary of where we are. So this is the summary tab. If you sort of look at this going forward, this is the summary tab, and what we've done is if you recall, historically at this time, we used to prepare a medium-term financial strategy update in the autumn with a view to it, which would have been a formal report, which we then used to inform the budget setting. Now, last year, because of uncertainties and particularly around the settlement, we concluded it was better to update the MTFS in March, which is in common with a lot of other authorities, or most other authorities, in fact. So we've done that. So the other side of that, of course, is we haven't got a new MTFS to look at, but what we've got here is the previous MTFS, which we have updated, so we know where we are going forward. So this is what this exercise is. So we've taken, in summary, we've taken the MTFS figures. These were from March. So this is what, these are the use of reserves we were projecting in the MTFS if you go back to the Cabinet report in March. So 847 in this financial year, 1076, so just over $1 million, 848 in the 23-24 financial year. So that's what we were projecting. We've then gone through looking at where we are in terms of savings. So we had some savings in the budget, and how are we doing in that? How are we doing against those savings targets? So these are these tabs here, and I won't go through these tabs, but you can see the differences. And I think the key one here actually is the key one in this area is actually the essential car user, which is the big difference in that one. So there's a lot of detail in there, and we've gone through all of those things. So in terms of savings, progress against budget, we're at 214,000 down. In terms of pressures, we're 380,000, with 307,000 down, and worse than where we hoped. We've got these local plan impacts, so we think that's going to be adverse. So there's £180,000 worth of costs coming through there. So there's a transport plan, and there are some other costs as well. And then what we've got here is options for change. So this is actually all part of the budget setting process. So we've got some options which are actually going for an initial discussion with Cabinet members tomorrow night, with a view to targeting at least £1 million worth of savings in those options we've developed. So I say they are under discussion and under development. Accommodation is a place marker, so we are hoping to get some savings out of that. And then also in this year, we've had a little bit more government funding, which is basically some money for local council tax support. And we had some amount in for the got an amount in there for the income. So this was prepared before Leslie had done the detailed return on the income support on the DCLG, or the LDLU HC, as it's levelling up department, as it's now called. But so there's a little bit of upside there. So what we're saying here now going forward is a revised use of reserves of 1.2, 1.4, 1.1. So what we've got to do is plug in these savings here to actually bridge that gap. So a couple of points. One is good news, actually. So the MTFS was done in early this calendar year, in January, February time. Subsequently, we've gone through the outturn, and there's a couple of, and actually the actual outturn was very much more favourable than what we were originally projecting. So in a way, our starting, what that means is our starting point at the 1st of April 2021 was much better. And the reasons for that actually are set out in that outturn report, which was the July cabinet. In broad terms, though, when the MTFS was based on the interim budget we set. So we're in the throes of COVID. So we set an interim budget guessing how things might pan out. And that was obviously a pretty very negative outlook. So actually things weren't as bad as we were projecting. So we were 2 million plus ahead of the game in the actual outturn compared to the revised budget. So some of our income lines held up better than we thought. We were able to mitigate some of those income losses with cost reductions. And then we also had some COVID support money from the government. So in combination, we were around £2 million better off. And then we did well because of various things happening about business rates retention. So principally, we were able to settle and finalise where we were on the enterprise zone, and some of the provisioning that we put against that we were able to release. And also we rather hoped there was some upside, but we were part of a business rate pilot in 2019-20, I believe it was, and that the outcome of that was about 0.7 million positive there. So overall, though the outlook in terms of day-to-day expenditure is slightly negative, the use of reserves is positive. So if you look at the working balance carried forward under these projections, then actually that's, we've got a minimum target of 2 million. So even if we don't do anything, we'll still be our heads will just about be above water on these projections. And I say what we're looking to do is create savings or additional income totaling above £1 million in the next budget line to actually close that gap. So hopefully that makes sense so far. I will stop there just to make sure that does make sense, because that's under the core assumptions, which I do want to talk to you about, if that's okay.
Yes, Simon, thank you. Before I open up to questions on just this part, I just wanted to, the yellow under development, does that correspond to the yellows further in the sheets? Is that what?
No, sorry, it's just a highlight in a way for me. So what we at the end of tomorrow, we may, unlikely, but say we agree £1 million worth of savings. So if I stick minus 1,000 in there and say pretend that's happened, you can see that actually if we save £1 million, if I sort of flow it across, then you can see the positioning is improved. So at the moment, of course, we haven't agreed anything, so we would obviously hope we will get somewhere in that. But what this model does is help us assess where we are. So at the moment, under the core assumptions that we've got, then that's what we're looking for. But I do want to sort of take you through some of the risks and basically some of the risks and issues that we do face, which mean that position is realistic, but not to say there's no downside on.
Do you want to take us through those risks now before I open up to general questions?
So the core assumption. So the most of the tabs are ups and downs on those various spend elements. But one of the key things I want to draw to the committee's attention to, and again, is the funding outlook. So if you look at 21-22, we've got, and hopefully you can see this reasonably. So in terms of what we've got,
Simon, just to say to members, this is also on page 17 of our report.
It is, yes. Yeah. So you have got all these figures. It's just there is one where I've had an update since I presented it, but I can recirculate this spreadsheet if members are interested enough to do that. So what we've got is revenue. What we had this year, we've got revenue support grant. We've got revenue support grant. We've got an amount that we estimate for retained business rates, and that's a very tricky area, but that's what we think we've got. We've got new homes bonus of 3 million. Got lower tier services grant of 617. There's a small movement on collection funds. So what we end up with is total funding of 8,967. Now, actually, I think there's something's gone missing there. So I think that's actually about 89.
It's 988.
988, is it? Yeah, so I've obviously managed to delete that somehow. Right, so that's 988. So if you look forward into 22-23, if looking forward is quite the right term. So revenue support grant is a bit of a zombie grant. It was due to finish 3 years ago, but we bizarrely got 168,000. I'm not quite sure what the rationale is, but if you go back 4 or 5 years, we used to get 4 million on that one. Retained business rates, as far as we know, is continuing broadly in line with the current scheme. The new homes bonus scheme is finishing now. So we're just on what is described as a legacy payment. So although we got 3 million this year, we're only due to get 988,000 next year and nothing the year after that. So what we've assumed is, and again, in this year, we got some COVID funding. So what we've assumed for the future years is we won't get the COVID funding, but we will get government grants that will make up the difference between what we can see we'll definitely get and 8166, which is the figure that we got for this year, excluding those COVID grants. So this is very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult and very, very binary. So what I can't imagine is that we wouldn't get anything. So I can't imagine it would be zero, although it's not necessarily impossible. So what I think will happen is we'll get another set of these 1 year sticking plaster grants, but this is a big area of risk. So although we've assumed the government is going to make up this money, I can't, hand on heart, I can't say this is where it's going to come from. So general consensus is, speaking with colleagues across Leicestershire and speaking with Pixel, who are consultants, there will be some damping or some transitional grant or some new scheme. So the lower tier services grant, for example, was a 1 year only. So there might be some equivalent of that 1 year only money. So that is a big area of risk. So the maximum downside there is 2.7 million next year, 3.6 million the year after that. So you can imagine if our savings target, rather than needing to save 1 million or so, if we need to save 3, 4, 5 million, then things get very, very difficult indeed. And we won't know the answer to this really until December. So this is a big challenge for us. And then if that wasn't quite enough, there's the opportunities and risks looks at 1 or 2 scenarios. So we've got the funding risks, so that's in red. We've got the environment bill, so I'm not sure to what extent the panel is aware of that, but the environment bill has a number of elements to it, and sort of the public headlines will probably be around sort of the climate change and environmental policies that will be the headlines. But for local government, the bill includes free garden waste collections, or is potentially proposed as free garden waste collections. So we at the moment generate 1.4 million out of garden waste collection. So that potentially would, the way it works out, that will be 700,000 loss of income next year, the way our subscriptions are structured, as the scheme winds up, and then a full loss of 1.4 million in year 23-24 when the Environment Bill is due to be implemented based on the timings we understand at the moment. So that's a big and difficult area for us. As I say, at the moment it's a bill. We don't know how the lobbying's going. Certainly the Local Government Association is lobbying MPs, ministers, telling them that this impact on local government is very, very significant. There's also an additional, I've talked about 1.4 million, and there's 1.5 million in there. The government also will potentially require us, based on the Environment Bill, to do food waste collections, and also to change the way we do recycling. So rather than a single commingled recyclate system that we have at the moment, then we'd have to have multiple streams of recyclates. So the government do say that they would fund us for that, but the cynic in me suspects that actually we wouldn't quite be funded for it. So if all that comes in, it's huge changes to the way our operations would work. A whole raft of additional costs which the government would say that they would fund, plus a large loss of garden waste income. So that's a very, very tricky area. And then the next one down there, which is changed, so I've highlighted that one in yellow because that is changed versus the numbers we've got. So the supported living reflects the loss of housing benefit. It creates a subsidy loss in some of our supported living units, which are run by charities rather than by registered providers. And because of that, there is a glitch. Well, our view, it is a glitch in the DWP rules. That means we're not actually able to recover all the housing benefit. And at the moment, and this is very, very binary, but at the moment, with the projections are this will cost us about £1 million a year, and the 300,000 there reflects costs over and above the budget and the service pressure which is built into some other areas of the spreadsheet. But the total supported living costs that we might have to bear, the run rate is sort of 1.1 million in total. I have got a detailed spreadsheet on that. I won't present, unless members are very keen, I wouldn't present that now. And then in terms of the positive, hopefully we might get around about 1.3 million in terms of the options for change, which is a process we're starting tomorrow. So if we were, if we were to assume just the green stuff, the green actions, we would be, we would be, in a reasonably good position. But if we assumed everything there, it's pretty negative. And if we assume we're not able to make any savings, which I don't think is realistic, but if we assumed Armageddon in the very worst scenario, we'd end up using 6.5 million reserves in 23-24. And then these, again, these are scenarios. So you can see in scenario A, the reserves are at a very healthy position. In a negative scenario, though, in year 3, we're either pretty bust or extremely bust. So clearly there are management actions we need. Clearly they're a couple of years out, but there are management actions we need to take. But what we'll do is what we may have to do is go round the loop again, potentially this year in the budget. So we've got a list of options that we're going to discuss in the autumn. If the settlement or news on the Environment Bill is much more negative, then we may have to take some additional actions to address this situation. So we're above, we can keep above the 2 million, and then that would be more potentially radical action required so that we can avoid this scenario. So, this I think does paint an overly negative picture, but I think we have, it's very negative and it's unlikely, but it's not impossible, and not being impossible requires us to have a look at it. So it's sort of leading in, so as a sort of final comment leading into the what's our approach to the budget. The core assumption is that the funding will be, we will get that funding and it will be made up, and the Environment Bill will prove to be reasonably benign, and there are potentially upsides on the supported living if the Carpenters Arms, who's basically the key provider in this, if they get registered provider status, then it flips over and it's all a little bit more positive. But our approach to the budget, which maybe I'll go into the next agenda and Councillor Barclay may want to go into, is to identify $1 million plus worth of savings in this, an exercise that's underway as from tomorrow, and then to see what the settlement is, and potentially have to go round the loop again on savings in sort of towards Christmas, early in the new year, once we understand what the settlement is, so that we can be sufficiently comfortable with the budget and the financial sustainability situation going forward. So I'll stop there. I hope that made sense. It is it potentially is quite a complicated story, as someone said. I sort of live this to a certain level, but I appreciate it might be a little bit complex if that's the first time you've come across it. So we'll stop there if there's any questions on any of that.
No, cheers. Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Tom, I am going to bring you in here actually, because it's the MTFS, before I open up to members. If you had any comments to start with, and then I'm going to open up to panel members for questions.
I think what we've tried to do here is show you all possible scenarios of what's going on. And the biggest problem we have is we do not know what the central government funding is going to be until December. But we are going to be working up a series of options for the various different scenarios, so that we have them made up. So if the settlement in December isn't right, we will take action which will reduce the expenditure by the amounts necessary. We don't want to be precipitous, and we may well, if it is the best case scenario or benign scenario, we may be absolutely fine. But we have to work up positions whereby we can deal with any scenario, because the last thing we want to do is end up in deficit. We will take management action to ensure that that does not happen. But this is, as I say, a very stark presentation, trying to be honest and open with you about the possibilities and where we could be. And we will bring forward any necessary action once we know what the settlement in December is, and also what's going to happen with the Environment Bill, and also what's going to happen with the Carpenters Arms, which are all unknowns. It's just things we can't, and that's why we're presenting the absolute worst case scenario, the medium case scenario, and the best rate scenario. And there isn't really an awful lot to say. I can't add anything else to it. Those are the figures, and you can see that if it goes well, we're going to be absolutely fine, but we can't assume that. And given the pandemic, given the funding we're having, I can't see central government being particularly generous with settlement money. But we will see. We will see. We just don't know at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Barclay. Panel members, we've had a long presentation now. We've got a substantial amount of information in our reports. Is there any questions that would like to ask either Simon or Councillor Barclay on anything that they've just gone through, or anything in our papers at this moment? So if you can show of hands, and then I'll read them through. Is there anybody? Okay, nobody's put. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bolton, did you put your hand up? No, that's fine. Okay, I don't see any show of hands. I think you've seen it. I have one question really, and and it's, yes, you're right. In December we are going to get the settlement, probably Christmas Eve. It's always Christmas Eve, isn't it? When we know. But joking aside, if we do lose the garden bins, and that's nearly 1.5 million rolled, in 2 years' time, but also if nothing comes to supplement the new homes bonus, you're looking at 5 million there deficit in 2 years of income that we would have had gone. And I see in your paper, Simon, and I think this was just for your notes, but you assumed the negative factor as Armageddon.
Yes.
And maybe scenario C is Armageddon if we don't know anything
yes, that's correct. I mean, maybe that's not the right sort of language, but basically that's assume everything negative happens, which I think is probably unlikely. But if everything negative happens, then what I will say, actually, that we are a sustainable council. So I think even if that happens, we will be a sustainable council, but we will be a very different council. So in that sort of scenario, it will be, what are the basic services that we need to deliver? So we won't necessarily actually have a lot of choices. It'll be, we'll empty the bins, we'll determine some planning applications, we'll clean some streets, and there won't be a lot more to the council than the sort of real basis. But the good news is we are, I think, sustainable. So some of the smaller districts faced with some of this stuff, will have more difficulties, and other districts have other issues in that they've done very well out of things like the business rates retention scheme. So those districts, some that are close to us that have those very large logistics centres have done very, very well out of business rates retention, and obviously for us, we didn't. So we lost AstraZeneca was lost, unfortunately, just immediately after the baseline was originally set. So
okay,
that's bad news. But yes, it is. There is, unfortunately, I guess what I'm trying to get across here is that there's a very wide range of scenarios from relatively benign to extremely difficult.
Okay, no, that's fine. Councillor Parsons, you've got your hand up before we finish on this item.
I presume that each of these scenarios is backed by the list of priorities of the things that would be cut first, and that's available to us. So in the best case scenario, everything moves and we're all in good shape. In the worst middle case scenario, we've got to find £1 million of savings, and that's going to be A, B, C, D, E. And in the worst case scenario, we've got to find £5 million of savings. That's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, whatever. So I presume that list of priorities matches these risk scenarios, and that's available to us.
No, I don't think it is actually, Jeff, at the moment, because we haven't drawn it up. What we've got to do is get it ready for December. But we will have a list, and we will determine. Hopefully, we'll continue to maintain services as they are. But we will have a list drawn up, and it's not that it's not available to, it just has not been drawn up, and it's still ongoing discussion. But as and when it is, and depending on the settlement, yes, of course, it'll be available.
Jeff, thank you very much. Is there any further you wanted to add to that? If not, I have one suggestion to make for our December meeting on this MTFS paper. We may not have the final details, but we should have more of an idea as to what grants we may get or may not get.
Yeah.
Can we have a short paper just to give us an update as to what government thinking is, what the Treasurer's thinking is towards the local government settlement, unless, of course, we have the final figures, which I doubt. Because then that will inform us more on any of the discussions that we have in our December meeting, because I don't think we're meeting towards the end, we're meeting towards the middle of December. So hopefully by then we would have an inkling of what would be happening or what's occurring in from the Treasury.
Yeah, we've got we do work with a boutique consultancy called Pixel. There's actually two of them, but they're former civil servants who work with DCLG, and they sort of read the runes and work it out. So I think what we might know by then is what the total departmental spend is. So we might know the total for local government, and then the next trick, of course, is how that's. So we know the total size of the pie. What we won't necessarily know is how the pie is going to be divvied up.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
We can. What we know, we may not necessarily know anything more. It's likely we will have some commentary and have some views. As you say, Councillor Meir, it's never quite Christmas Eve, but traditionally it was always the Thursday night, the Thursday of the draft budget, which is middle of December. That was very often the day we used to get the figures.
Okay, no, that's fine. If anything you can bring that updates us,
well, no problem,
that will definitely help. Okay, we're being asked to note this report. I'll just do a quick verbal roll call. Councillor Bolton.
Happy to note the report, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Happy to note the report.
Cheers. Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Yes, happy to note.
Cheers. Councillor Parton.
Noted.
Thank you. And Councillor Seaton.
Happy to note, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Which then finally puts us on to item 7, which is the approach to budget setting for 2022-2023, which is a verbal update from Simon. I think you might have said some of it in the previous report, Simon. Over to yourself.
Yes. It's between Councillor Barkley and myself, so I was sort of trying to go into it. I can't say that word, but basically flow into it. So what described we're going to do. So tomorrow the process starts. We have got officers have prepared a list which totals about £1.5 million or so. We'll be going through that list to see what the proposals are, and then we've got then if that list doesn't prove sufficient in terms of the total savings we think we might need or might want to take, then there are sort of draft other lists under development, and we'll have to bring those round. So I think Councillor Barkley, the way we've always done it is trying to preserve services in the way that we operate at the moment. How possible that will be going forward is unclear, but that's the sort of going in position. I don't know. Probably let Councillor Barkley expand on that if he feels.
Yeah, I think that's true. We don't want to start scaremongering about uncertainties, and when we get some facts, we're obviously not going to sit on our hands and do nothing. We're going to look at what we can do to preserve the existing services at whatever level, and have a list of. Once we get the settlement, we can then go to that list, and it will have, we're giving it great consideration. It will not be decided until we know the settlement. It will not be decided. We're not going to speculate on it, but clearly we are going to look at what could happen and what we may need to do. And that's work in progress, and it's going to take the best part of the next 5 months to do it. There's no easy answers. And I'm hoping very much that after December, January, we'll be coming back to you and saying, we're all right. It's better than we thought, but we just can't afford to do nothing. We have got to look at it, and we have got to have options available to us. And that's exactly what we're doing over the next 5 months.
Thank you, Simon and Councillor Barkley, on that. Earlier, I referred to Councillor Barkley as Tom. Apologies, Councillor Barkley, because this is a formal meeting and for calling you by your first name.
You can call me. I've been called far worse than Tom.
No, that's fine. Does any panel members have any questions to ask to Simon or Councillor Barkley regarding the budget setting process or what happens next in the budget? I don't see any hands up. No, that's fine. We're again being asked to note this verbal report. So I'm just doing a quick roll call. Councillor Bolton?
No, nothing further.
No, sorry. Are you happy to note the report?
Oh, sorry. Happy.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to note the report.
Councillor Parsons?
Yeah, happy to note.
Thank you. Councillor Parton?
Noted.
And Councillor Seaton?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to note.
Cheers. Thank you very much, everybody. I think that is the end of the agenda and all the agenda items. We have a future meeting date set for 8th of December at 2021. Unless there's anything further, I'd just like to thank everybody for this evening and wish you all a good night. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, Chair, sorry. Before we finish,
Yeah.
can we quickly look over items for the next meeting? So we've talked about in the meeting, we talked about getting the P7 report.
Mhm.
Are there any other items that have come forward from this, do you think?
Yes, thank you, Ed. So the other thing we should have available on the 7th will be the draft budget. So I can't quite remember the timings, but the draft budget report should be published at that point. I can't remember when Cabinet is. I think Cabinet's relatively early in December, but I think certainly the papers should be published by then. So, so the committee will have the opportunity to have a look at those and see what the proposals are, and then as I say, hopefully we might have a little bit more insight into the settlement. So we'll know, or we will do a short papers, basically saying what, gazing into our very cloudy crystal ball and seeing what we can conclude.
Okay, so there will be the two agenda items on there, I think. Cheers. Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you for that.